The planet Renar was home to two great people. The first were the Seru, an ancient race with tall bodies and bright skin that seemed to shine under the twin suns. The second were the humans, who had arrived much later from far away. At first, the Seru had doubted if the humans could survive on their world, but over time they had accepted them as neighbors and even as allies. Together they built farms, cities, and trade routes across the valleys and plains. Yet, in the heart of the planet, there was one place both races feared. That place was the Sacred Hall. The Sacred Hall stood in a barren desert of black stone. It was larger than any mountain in sight, a great tower carved from strange metal and crystal that no one could explain. The walls glowed faintly in the night, as if the hall was alive. For generations, the Seru told the humans that no mortal should enter it. They spoke of curses, of dangers that would swallow any who tried to open its gates. The Seru called it the dwelling of the divine. To them, the warning was not a story, but a law of survival. Humans, however, were not always satisfied with silence. Many had asked questions, yet the Seru elders always gave the same answer. The hall is not for mortals. Do not enter. That was the end of it. And so, the sacred hall remained untouched, watched from afar by curious eyes, but never challenged. Until Myra came. Myra was a young human explorer. She grew up in the city of Lorne, a place where humans and Seru lived side by side. From childhood, she had heard the stories about the sacred hall, and instead of scaring her, they had filled her with questions. Why should no mortal enter? Who had built the hall? What secrets did it hide? Her father, who worked as a miner, told her to let the questions go. Her mother, who sold tools in the market, said the Seru must have good reasons. But Myra had a restless heart. She believed answers were worth the risk. One day, while studying maps of the desert, Myra noticed strange patterns around the hall. Energy waves rippled across the land, hidden from ordinary sight, but her scanners picked them up. The waves were steady, almost like a heartbeat. She checked them again and again, but the result was the same. The hall was not dead stone. It was active, pulsing with power, waiting for something. That discovery was enough to spark her plan. If the Seru would not explain, then she would uncover the truth herself. She first told Tom, her closest friend. Tom was an engineer who repaired machines for the city. He was practical, cautious, and always looking for the safest path. When Myra showed him the energy readings, his eyes widened. He said the hall must be more than a temple. He believed it might be a machine, older than either race. Yet his fear held him back. He reminded Myra that the Seru had warned against entering. He asked what would happen if she woke something dangerous. Myra listened, but deep inside, she knew she could not walk away. Curiosity was stronger than fear. At night, Myra often walked to the city wall where she could see the faint glow of the hall far across the desert. Its light flickered like a star that refused to fade. Each time she looked at it, she felt it calling to her. It was not a call of doom, but of invitation. She believed the hall was waiting for someone to understand it. She believed that someone could be human. The more she thought about it, the more she was sure. The next morning, Myra visited the Seru archives. The Seru kept records older than human history itself. She searched for writings about the sacred hall. Most were warnings, written in heavy words, saying that those who tried to enter had vanished or gone mad. Yet there were no clear details, only fear. The Seru elders had chosen silence over truth. This silence made Myra restless. She wanted proof. She wanted to see with her own eyes. She returned to Tom with her plan. She would travel to the hall and study it directly. Tom shook his head. He said it was madness. He said she was risking her life. But Myra was firm. She told him that humans had crossed stars to reach new worlds. They had survived storms, hunger, and endless space. If they had listened to fear, they would never have left Earth. Now the Sacred Hall was the next step. Humanity could not ignore it forever. Tom was torn. He admired Myra's courage, yet he dreaded what might come. He warned her again, but he also knew her too well. Once Myra set her mind on something, nothing could turn her away. At last, he gave a long sigh and said he would help. If she was going, then she would not go alone. Myra smiled. She knew she had found her first ally. That night, under the twin moons of Rinner, Myra and Tom prepared. The desert waited, and beyond it stood the Sacred Hall, glowing softly like a silent giant. For centuries, it had kept its secrets. Now, for the first time, humans were ready to step closer. The story of the Forbidden Place was about to begin again, but this time, it would not end with silence. The morning sun rose over the desert of Rinner, painting the black stone sands with gold. Myra stood on the balcony of her home, watching the distant horizon. In her heart, she felt excitement mixed with fear. Today, she would speak to the council. Today, she would present her discovery. The Sacred Hall was not silent. It was alive, and humanity could no longer ignore it. Tom walked up beside her, carrying a stack of data chips. He looked tired, as if he had been awake all night. His voice was calm, but his eyes showed worry. He asked her if she was sure about speaking to the council. Myra answered firmly that she had no choice. If they wanted to stop her, they would. After hearing her first thought, the human council gathered in the city hall. Around the long table sat farmers, engineers, merchants, and a few Saru guests who had been invited to listen. Myra stood at the front, her hands steady as she placed her scanner. Readings on the projector. The room filled with glowing lines and pulsing patterns. She explained how the Sacred Hall emitted energy waves that repeated like a heartbeat. She told them it was not a dead structure, but a working machine. Tom supported her with technical details, pointing out that the energy could power entire cities if understood. Murmurs spread through the room. Some looked impressed. Others looked afraid. Finally, Elder Roland, the eldest of the Saru, stood up. His tall frame cast a shadow across the table, and his voice was heavy with authority. He said that the Sacred Hall must never be entered. He repeated the words passed down through Saru generations. No mortal should cross its gates. He reminded them of the legends where Saru explorers had tried and vanished. He told them the hall did not welcome visitors. To step inside was to invite. Myra asked him why. She asked what truly happened to those who entered, but Roland gave no clear answer. He only said that danger waited within, danger no one could control. The Saru had learned through loss, and now they warned others so that history would not repeat. His words were final. The Saru would never allow such a risk again. The council fell silent. Some humans agreed with the Saru. They argued that peace depended on respect. If the Saru said the hall was forbidden, then humans should listen. Others, however, sided with Myra. They said fear was not enough to chain human curiosity. They said the hall might hold knowledge that could change everything. The room divided between those who wanted safety and those who wanted discovery. After the meeting, Myra walked outside, her thoughts heavy. She felt the weight of doubt pressing on her, but her determination did not fade. Tom caught up with her and said she had spoken well, even if the elders rejected her. He also warned her that some humans would try to stop her now. They would not want her risking the fragile peace with the Saru. Myra nodded but kept her eyes fixed on the horizon. She told Tom that peace without truth was only silence. Humanity needed to know. That evening, as the twin suns sank in the city, lights began to glow. Myra visited the market. She walked among merchants and travelers, listening to their voices. She heard whispers of her speech. Some called her brave. Others called her reckless. Children asked their parents about the sacred hall. Curiosity was spreading like fire, and Myra knew there was no turning back. The question had been planted in every mind. What was inside the hall? Later that night, Myra and Tom sat in Tom's workshop. Maps of the desert lay on the table, marked with paths and landmarks. Tools and scanners were lined up beside them. Tom said they would need more than courage. They would need a pilot who could handle the dangerous winds of the desert. Myra thought for a moment and said there was one man she trusted. His name was Ben. Ben was a skilled pilot who'd flown through storms and across mountain ranges. He was known for his steady hands and calm nature. Myra believed he would not turn away from a challenge. The next day, they met him at the hangar. Ben listened quietly as Myra explained her plan. His brow furrowed and his arms folded across his chest. He reminded them of the Saru warning. He said the hall was sacred and forbidden. But Myra spoke with passion, telling him the hall was not a curse, but a chance for humanity to rise. She told him that history was written by those who dared. Tom added that without a skilled pilot, the journey would fail. Ben looked at them for a long time before finally agreeing. He said if they were going, he would not let them go alone. The team was formed. Myra, Tom, and Ben. Each brought their own strength. Myra had courage and vision. Tom had knowledge and skill with machines. Ben had the steady hands needed to cross the desert skies. Together, they would face the sacred hall. None of them knew what waited within, but all of them knew they could not walk away. That night, Myra looked once more at the horizon. The hall glowed faintly, a silent giant waiting in the darkness. The Saru said it was forbidden. The council warned against it. Yet the call of the hall was stronger than all voices. Myra whispered to herself that no door should remain closed forever. She believed the hall held the key to the next chapter of humanity's journey. The warning had been spoken. The risk had been named. But the path forward had already begun. The desert of Rinner stretched like an endless sea of black stone. Its winds howled through the canyons, carrying sharp dust that could tear through cloth and skin. Few dared to travel far into it, for the storms could rise without warning, burying machines in sand or breaking wings in the air. Yet beyond this hostile land stood the sacred hall, tall as a mountain and glowing faintly under the twin moons. It was toward this dangerous place that Myra, Tom, and Ben now set their course. Ben prepared his small hovercraft in the city hangar. The craft was old but reliable, with wide wings powered by twin engines that could cut through the storm winds. Its cabin was tight, but it had enough space for the three of them. Along with their scanners, food packs, and climbing gear, Tom checked every bolt and circuit, making sure the engines would not fail in the middle of the desert. Myra loaded the maps and readings she had gathered, her heart beating with a mix of fear and excitement. Once the sun dipped below the horizon, they would fly. Before leaving, Ben reminded them that secrecy was important. The council had not approved their journey, and the Saru elders had forbidden it. If word spread, they might be stopped before they even reached the desert. So they waited until midnight. Under the shadow of the city's wall, they slipped into the hovercraft. The engines hummed softly, and the craft lifted from the ground with a low vibration. Myra looked down at the sleeping city one last time, then turned her eyes toward the desert. The journey had begun. The first hours were calm. The night sky shone bright with countless stars, and the desert stretched below them like a black ocean. Myra sat by the window, staring at the distant glow of the sacred hall. It was faint, but it never wavered, like a star fixed upon the land. Tom studied his scanner, watching the energy waves grow stronger as they drew closer. Ben kept his hands steady on the controls, guiding them between high stone ridges that rose from the desert floor. The silence of the night was broken only by the steady hum of the engines. Then the storm came. It rose from the east without warning, a wall of dust and lightning. Ben shouted for them to hold on as the hovercraft shook. The winds howled and slammed against the wings. The engines roared as Ben fought to keep them level. Lightning cracked across the sky, lighting the black desert in blinding flashes. Myra gripped her seat as the craft dropped suddenly, her heart racing. Tom's scanners flickered with static, and for a moment they lost all sense of direction. But Ben's hands never faltered. He pulled the craft upward, steadying it against the storm's force. Slowly, painfully, they pushed through the wall of dust until the skies cleared once more. When the storm passed, they sat in silence, their faces pale and their breaths heavy. Ben wiped sweat from his brow and gave a small smile. He said the desert was only testing them, and that the haul must lie ahead. Myra laughed softly, not out of joy but relief. She felt they had already crossed a point of no return. They were too deep into the desert to turn back now. Tom checked the scanners again. The energy waves were stronger than ever, pulsing like a drumbeat under the earth. He whispered that they were close. Hours later, as the first light of dawn touched the horizon, the sacred hall appeared in full view. Even from a distance, it was breathtaking. Its walls were smooth and silver, rising higher than any mountain. Strange glowing lines ran across its surface like rivers of light. The base stretched wide, with towering gates carved into its side. The gates glowed faintly, as if waiting to be opened. Around it, the desert floor was cracked and bare, as though life itself dared not grow near. The sight filled them with awe and fear. Ben guided the craft to a flat ridge nearby, where they landed. The engines fell silent, and the desert seemed to hold its breath. The three of them stepped out onto the black stone. The air was heavy, buzzing faintly as if charged with unseen energy. Myra felt the hairs on her arms rise. Tom's scanner beeped wildly, the screen filled with strange readings he could not explain. He said the hall was alive, reacting to their presence. Myra's eyes stayed fixed on the gates, glowing brighter now that they were near. She whispered that the hall was calling them. They unpacked their gear and made camp on the ridge, staring at the hall in silence. Each of them felt the weight of the moment. They had reached the forbidden place, a place no human had stood so close to before. Tom asked what they should do next. Ben suggested they wait until nightfall, when the desert winds were calmer. Myra agreed, though her heart urged her to rush forward. She knew patience was wise, but the urge to step closer was strong as the day passed. They prepared their tools, checked their scanners, and rested their bodies. The hall remained silent, yet its glow never faded. When night finally fell, Myra stood with Tom and Ben at the edge of the ridge. Together, they began their walk across the cracked desert floor toward the towering gates. Each step echoed in their hearts like a drumbeat, matching the pulse of the energy waves. The sacred hall loomed larger with every step, its gates rising above them like the entrance to another world. The journey had brought them here. The forbidden gates were before them. The next choice would decide everything. The gates of the sacred hall stood before them like the jaws of a giant. Myra, Tom, and Ben felt small beneath the towering walls of silver stone and glowing lines. The gates pulsed with light, almost like a heartbeat, responding to their presence. For a moment, none of them spoke. The silence was deep, broken only by the desert wind rushing across the cracked ground. Myra stepped forward first. Her hand brushed against the glowing surface. To her surprise, the wall felt warm, as if alive. The glowing lines brightened, spreading like ripples in water. A deep hum filled the air, low and steady. Tom's scanner beeped wildly, showing energy levels far beyond anything he had seen. Ben reached for his side pack, his hand shaking slightly. He whispered that the hall was awake. Without warning, the gates began to move. They slid apart with a sound like stone grinding against stone, though no dust fell. Instead, the air shimmered as if a veil was being pulled aside. A passage opened before them, leading into a darkness lit only by the faint glow of the walls. Mira looked back at Tom and Ben. She could see fear in their eyes, but she also saw determination. She took a deep breath and stepped through. The others followed close behind. Inside, the hall was vast. The walls rose high above them, glowing with the same flowing lines as the outside. The air was cool and carried a faint scent of metal. The floor was smooth, yet when they walked, their footsteps echoed endlessly, as though the hall was a living cave. The passage stretched forward, then split into many corridors. Each corridor shimmered, and the wall shifted slightly as if alive. Tom studied the scanner and frowned. He said the hall was changing shape. The walls were not fixed. The corridors were shifting like a puzzle. Ben cursed under his breath and asked how they would ever find their way. Myra placed her hand against one of the walls and closed her eyes. She felt a vibration, gentle yet powerful, like a silent voice trying to speak. She told them the hall was guiding them, but it was testing their resolve. They chose a corridor and moved forward. The walls shifted behind them, closing off the way back. Ben glanced over his shoulder, unease in his voice. They were trapped unless they pressed on. Tom adjusted his scanner and tried to map the energy flow. He noticed that the brighter the glowing lines, the safer the path seemed. Myra trusted her instincts, and with Tom's readings, they followed the light. Soon, they reached their first challenge. The corridor opened into a vast chamber. In the center was a pit glowing with blue energy. It stretched wide, with no bridge across. The air above, it shimmered like heat on a summer road. At the far side, another passage waited, but there was no clear way to cross. Ben tested the edge with a stone. The stone fell into the pit and vanished in a flash of light. He muttered that stepping into it meant certain death. Tom studied the walls and found symbols glowing faintly, forming patterns. He realized they were reacting to thought. When he focused on the idea of a path, the symbols brightened slightly. Mira joined him, closing her eyes and concentrating. Slowly, faint platforms appeared across the pit, glowing steps of light. Ben hesitated. The platforms looked fragile, as if they would vanish with one wrong move. But Mira stepped onto the first one. It held her weight, glowing brighter beneath her foot. She turned and told the others to trust the hall. With careful steps, they crossed the pit one by one. At one point, Ben slipped, but Mira grabbed his arm and pulled him back. Together, they made it to the other side. The glowing platforms vanished. The moment they touched solid ground again, Tom said the hall was not trying to kill them. It was testing their unity and courage. Ben still frowned but admitted that they had passed something important. Mira smiled faintly. She said the hall wanted to see if they trusted each other, because without trust, no one could pass. They pressed forward into more shifting corridors. The second test came in the form of moving walls. The passage ahead twisted like a maze, with sections sliding back and forth. Gaps opened and closed, forcing them to time their steps carefully. One mistake could mean being crushed. Tom guided them by marking the rhythm of the movements. Mira led boldly, while Ben covered their rear. At one point, a wall nearly caught Tom, but Ben pulled him to safety. Again, teamwork saved them. When they reached the end of the shifting maze, the wall settled and the hum of the hall grew louder. Mira placed her hand on the final wall, and it opened into another vast chamber. At its center stood 3 tall pillars of light. Each pulsed with energy, forming a triangle. Beyond the pillars, another door glowed faintly, waiting. Myra realized this was the hall's final test of the night. She looked at Tom and Ben. They were exhausted but unbroken. She knew the hall was measuring more than skill. It was measuring heart. She told them they had to face this together. They stepped toward the pillars, and the air around them shimmered with power. Images began to form within the light, illusions of fear and doubt. Mira saw a vision of her parents begging her to turn back. Tom saw machines breaking apart in his hands, all his work failing. Ben saw himself flying alone in the storm, his friends gone forever. The illusions tried to weaken them, to make them stop, but they held on to each other. Myra reached out and told Tom and Ben that the visions were lies. She reminded them of the storm they had crossed and the pit they had defeated. She said they were stronger together. Slowly, the illusions faded and the pillars dimmed. The glowing door opened, revealing the path ahead. Exhausted but victorious, they stepped through. The sacred hall had tested them and allowed them forward. For the first time, humans had crossed its trials. The hall was not only a place of danger. It was a judge, and it had chosen to let them continue. The glowing door closed behind Mira, Tom, and Ben, leaving them in a vast circular chamber. The ceiling rose high above, filled with moving lights that looked like stars drifting through the sky. The floor was smooth and marked with ancient symbols that pulsed gently, as if alive. In the center stood a crystal pillar, tall and bright, its glow filling the room with a calm but heavy presence. Myra took a step forward, but before she could reach the pillar, the air shimmered. Figures appeared, tall and graceful, with shining skin and eyes that glowed like fire. They were the Saru elders, not in their physical bodies, but as projected forms made of light. Their presence carried authority, and their voices echoed through the chamber with power. The lead figure spoke. His face was familiar to Myra. It was Elder Roland, the same elder who had warned them during the council. His voice was calm, but carried the weight of years. He said that they had crossed a line no mortal should cross. He told them the sacred hall was not just a place of tests. It was a relic from an ancient race, far older than the Saru or the humans. Myra's eyes widened. She asked what race he spoke of. Roland explained that before the Saru, another civilization had ruled the stars. They were beings of great knowledge who built wonders across the galaxy. The Sacred Hall was one of those wonders, left behind as both a temple and a machine. When the Saru first found it, they thought it was divine. They sent explorers inside, but none returned. The few who did were broken in mind, whispering of endless light and voices they could not understand. After many losses, the Saru sealed the hall and declared it forbidden. Tom listened carefully, his mind racing. He asked why the Saru never tried again. Roland answered that the hall had rejected them. Its test did not respond to Saru minds. The walls remained silent, the doors unyielding. The Saru realized it was not meant for them. They feared angering the ancient power that created it. So they made it law that no mortal should enter. It was safer to fear the hall than the challenge. Ben frowned and crossed his arms. He asked why the hall responded to humans now. Roland's face grew stern. He said he did not know, but it troubled him. The hall was awake again, and its doors had opened for humans, not Saru. This meant the hall was choosing. It was not a curse. It was a judge, and it had judged humanity worthy to try. Myra felt her heart pound. She remembered the pit of light, the shifting walls, and the illusions of fear. Each trial had felt personal, as if the hall understood them. She asked if the hall was alive. Roland paused before answering. He said it was not alive as mortals understood life, but it carried the will of its makers. It was a guardian of knowledge, waiting for the right heirs. Whether humans were truly those heirs or only another trial remained unknown. Tom stepped forward. His voice was steady, though his hands trembled. He said that humanity had always faced the unknown. They crossed space with fragile ships, survived. harsh worlds, and built homes in places no one thought possible. If the hall was testing courage, then humans had shown it many times before. He argued that to turn back now would be to waste what the hall had offered. Rowland's expression softened, though sadness lingered in his eyes. He said that the Seru had once thought the same. They too had dreamed of unlocking the hall, yet the hall had turned its face away from them. To see it now choosing humans was painful, for it meant their time had passed. The Seru had guarded the hall for ages, only to learn it was not meant for them. Ben spoke next. His voice was firm and steady. He said that the hall might be dangerous, but humanity could not run from danger forever. Every step into the stars had been risky, yet they took those steps because they believed tomorrow would be brighter. If the hall held knowledge that could light that tomorrow, then it was their duty to try. The chamber grew quiet. The Seru elders watched them, their glowing forms flickering slightly as if strained. Rowland finally nodded. He said the Seru would not stop them. They could not, even if they wished. The hall had already chosen, but he warned them that the tests ahead would be harsher. The hall did not give its secrets easily. Many trials still waited, and the final one could cost them their lives. Myra met his gaze without fear. She said that humanity would face those trials. She promised they would not dishonor the hall or the Seru. She said they came not to steal, but to prove themselves worthy. Roland studied her for a long moment. Then his image slowly faded. One by one, the other elders vanished, leaving the chamber silent once again. The crystal pillar in the center brightened, its glow stronger than before. Symbols spread across the floor, forming a path that led deeper into the hall. Myra felt a surge of energy inside her, a mix of fear and determination. The Seru had spoken the truth. The hall was not just a sacred place. It was a trial of destiny. Humanity was being tested by powers far beyond them. Tom adjusted his scanner and whispered that the path was opening for them. Ben placed his hand on Myra's shoulder and said they had come too far to turn back. Together, the three of them stepped onto the glowing path. The hall's hum grew louder, as if it approved. The journey was not finished. It was only beginning. Mira, Tom, and Ben followed the glowing path deeper into the sacred hall. The air around them hummed with energy, and the walls seemed to pulse like a living being. Every step made the glow beneath their feet brighter, as if the hall was guiding them forward. Myra felt a mixture of fear and excitement. The final chamber was near, and she knew this was the moment that would decide everything. The passage opened into a vast circular room, far larger than any chamber they had seen before. The ceiling soared high above, shimmering with moving patterns of light that looked like stars drifting in the night sky. The floor was smooth and glowing, carved with ancient symbols that radiated warmth. In the center of the room floated a sphere of pure light, hovering silently above the ground. It pulsed rhythmically, sending waves of energy through the air. The hall's hum grew louder, vibrating in their bones. Mira approached the sphere cautiously, but the instant she did, a vision appeared before her eyes. She saw her home city of Lorne burning, with humans and Seru running in fear. Her parents called out to her, their voices trembling with sorrow. The vision felt real, and her heart raced. She stumbled backward, clutching Tom's arm. Tom and Ben were facing their own visions as well. Tom saw all of his machines breaking down, projects he had worked on for years crumbling to dust. Ben saw himself flying alone through a storm, stranded in the desert with no hope of return. The illusions were frightening, but Mira remembered what the Seru elders had said. The hall did not want to destroy them. It wanted to test them. The visions were a challenge to their courage, their unity, and their trust in each other. She took a deep breath and shouted for Tom and Ben to focus on what was real, not what they feared. She told them that they had faced storms, pits of light, and shifting walls together, and they had survived. This was no different. Tom closed his eyes and centered himself, remembering the teamwork that had carried them this far. He saw Myra's determination and Ben's steadiness, and he realized that the hall was testing their unity. Together, they had passed every trial, and they could pass this one as well. Ben tightened his grip on the railing beside him and nodded to Myra, signaling that he was ready. Myra stepped forward, reaching out to the sphere. The visions tried to pull her back, showing her fears and doubts. She ignored them and focused on the light, letting it guide her. Tom and Ben followed, placing their hands on the sphere as well. The moment their hands touched it, the illusions vanished. The room became calm, filled only with the soft glow of the sphere. The energy waves around them stabilized, no longer threatening but welcoming. The sphere began to spin slowly, casting beams of light across the chamber. Symbols on the floor shifted and aligned, forming patterns that Myra could almost understand. She realized that the hall was sharing its knowledge with them, showing the paths of energy, the designs of machines, and the secrets of the stars. Tom's eyes widened as he recognized patterns that could power entire cities or navigate distant worlds. Ben felt a rush of understanding about navigation and energy control that he had never imagined possible. Myra looked at her friends, and they all knew the same truth. The hall had accepted them. They had passed the final test not through strength alone, but through courage, trust, and unity. The trials had measured more than skill. They had measured the heart of humanity itself. Suddenly, a new passage opened. At the far side of the chamber, light flowed outward, forming a tunnel lined with symbols that pulsed rhythmically. Myra understood that this was the path to the knowledge the hall had kept for centuries. She felt a mixture of awe and responsibility. This was more than discovery. This was a gift, and it came with the expectation of care. Tom adjusted his scanner, amazed at the new readings. The energy was immense, but stable. It could be harnessed safely, given the right understanding. Myra stepped into the passage first, with Tom and Ben following closely. Each step felt lighter, as though the hall was supporting them. The sphere continued to hover behind them, glowing brighter and pulsing gently, like a heartbeat of approval. As they walked, Myra realized something important. The hall had not been a place of doom, as the Seru had feared. It had been a test waiting for the right beings to unlock its secrets. The ancient builders had created it as both a guardian and a teacher. And now, for the first time, humanity had proven itself worthy. Finally, they reached a chamber filled with holographic projections, star maps, and blueprints of ancient machines. Knowledge older than the Seru and humans combined spread before them. Myra, Tom, and Ben stared in wonder, realizing that the possibilities were limitless. They had survived the hall's trials and earned the chance to bring this knowledge back to their people. Myra whispered to her friends that this was only the beginning. The hall had opened a door to a new future, one that would allow humanity to rise beyond their world. Tom and Ben nodded, feeling the same mixture of awe and determination. The hall had judged them, and they had passed. The challenge now was to use what they had learned wisely. The three friends stood together, gazing at the glowing sphere and the endless knowledge around them. They had faced fear, illusions, and tests of courage. They had remained united, and in doing so, they had unlocked a future that could change the fate of their people forever. The Sacred Hall had chosen them, and humanity had answered. Myra, Tom, and Ben stood in the final chamber, gazing at the glowing sphere and the streams of ancient knowledge flowing around them. The walls shimmered with star maps, energy grids, and blueprints for machines that seemed more like miracles than anything they had seen. The Sacred Hall had tested them, challenged their courage, and judged their hearts. Now, it offered its secrets to humanity. Myra stepped closer to the sphere and reached out her hand. The light responded to her touch, pulsing gently as if acknowledging her presence. She felt warmth and understanding flow into her mind. Symbols rearranged themselves, forming patterns that she could comprehend. Each pattern revealed how energy could be harnessed, how new engines could fly faster and farther, how cities could thrive with power the world had never known. She looked at Tom and Ben, and their eyes reflected the same wonder and excitement. Tom adjusted his scanner, which now displayed readings beyond anything imaginable. He realized that with this knowledge, humans could travel farther into the stars, build stronger settlements, and create machines that could last for generations. He felt a surge of pride for his people. Ben, meanwhile, examined star maps the hall projected in the air. He traced the routes with his fingers, imagining ships navigating safely between planets and moons, exploring systems that no human had ever seen. Mira spoke softly, telling her friends that the hall had given them more than knowledge. It had given them responsibility. The information was powerful, and it could change the fate of their species. She reminded them that the Seru had once tried and failed. The hall was not easy to understand, and mistakes could be dangerous. But humanity had shown courage, unity, and intelligence. They had proven they could rise to the challenge. The trio spent hours studying the projections, learning how to read the hall's patterns and interpret its ancient language. Each moment brought new discoveries. Tom identified methods to generate energy without harm, while Ben discovered ways to navigate the galaxy using the hall's ancient star charts. Myra understood the hall's deeper lessons about courage, trust, and responsibility. Together, they realized that their people could now achieve things once thought impossible. As the sun rose over Rinner, the trio prepared to leave the hall. The glowing sphere pulsed one last time, and the walls seemed to hum a gentle farewell. The passage behind them opened, leading back to the desert. Myra took one last look at the chamber. She knew this place would always remain sacred, not only for its knowledge but for the trials it had demanded. The hall had chosen humanity, but it had also demanded their best. Outside, the desert felt calm, almost peaceful after the trials inside the hall. The black stone shimmered faintly under the twin suns, reflecting the glow of the distant structure. Mira, Tom, and Ben stood together, looking at the sacred hall, no longer a forbidden place, but a symbol of what humans could achieve. The wind carried a soft hum from the hall, like a heartbeat of approval. Back in the city of Lorne, the three shared their knowledge carefully with the council and the Seru elders. They explained what they had learned, how humanity had passed the hall's tests, and how the knowledge could be used to improve lives, explore new worlds, and strengthen bonds between humans and Seru. The elders listened with awe and respect. Realizing that the humans had achieved what even the Seru could not, the city soon began to change. Engineers and scientists applied the knowledge from the hall to build advanced machines, improve energy systems, and expand transportation networks. Ships capable of longer journeys were constructed, allowing humans to explore distant planets. Education flourished as people studied the hall's lessons, learning both technical skills and the importance of courage, trust, and unity. Myra, Tom, and Ben became teachers and guides, sharing not only the knowledge of the hall but the wisdom gained from its trials. The Seru elders watched as humanity grew stronger. They acknowledged that the hall had chosen well. Where once humans had been seen as fragile newcomers, they were now recognized as a species capable of greatness. The words that once warned against entering the hall changed in meaning. The sacred hall no mortal should enter became the sacred hall that humans could enter, a testament to the courage and spirit of those who dared to face the unknown. Myra often returned to the edge of the desert, looking back at the hall. Its gates remained open, glowing faintly in the sun, waiting silently for those who would follow. She knew that humanity's journey was only beginning. The hall had given them knowledge, but the real test was how they would use it. She felt pride in her people and hope for the future. Tom and Ben stood beside her, sharing her sense of purpose. Together, they had faced fear, uncertainty, and impossible challenges. Together, they had unlocked the secrets of the hall. And together, they knew that humanity had risen to a new chapter, one of courage, unity, and limitless potential. The sacred hall had chosen humanity, and humanity had answered. The era of exploration, discovery, and greatness had begun. The world of Rinner, and perhaps the entire galaxy, would never be the same again.